I have to admit that Terminator 3 is one of those movies that I've been in denial about liking for years. Recently, I picked up a copy of it from the supermarket where it was on sale in a clearance bin, and having rewatched it again, I find this is a film that I really like and think is a very good sequel. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what I think doesn't work in this film and what I think does. The biggest problem, I think, with Terminator 3 is the take on John Connor's character is a misfire. What do we know about John Connor at the end of Terminator 2? He's a precocious, cynical kid. He's a gifted hacker. And like his mother, Sarah Connor, he has special knowledge about the future. The difference between the knowledge that Sarah Connor has and John Connor has at the end of Terminator 2 is that, as far as John Connor knows, Judgment Day was averted, which would seem to present two ways you could play his character. Either he's no longer worried about Judgment Day and the Terminators, and may have even forgotten about the whole thing, or put it out of his mind for the most part, because he certainly can't tell anyone about it. So he may have just gone on and lived a normal life somewhere, doing the kind of things we saw him doing in Terminator 2. A little older, probably not the same kind of delinquent that he was, but probably still very tech savvy and keeping an eye on what goes on the internet. The plus of playing John Connor as someone who became a regular guy is that when the Terminator shows up again, instead of him standing there awestruck seeing Arnold, he could have been like, oh, hell no, You could have had some comedy with him, trying to get away from the Terminator. Or the other way you could have played his character would be playing him much like Sarah Connor was played in Terminator 2, that he's gone mad from this knowledge and has never been able to convince himself that Judgment Day isn't still coming. You could have portrayed him as a survivalist, living in a cave or a sewer somewhere, with his computer layer surrounded by booby traps. So when the Terminator does show up, he's actually got defenses. But playing John Connor as a humble drifter, it just doesn't seem to fit with anything we know about him from the previous movie. And the problem with the way he's portrayed is that he has no character arc. He's just the same the entire time. This sad, lonely drifter, blah, blah, blah. I think the opportunity there was to either play the character straight or play him gonzo. And gonzo, I think, would have been better. Having John Connor being someone who has clearly become unstable because of what he experienced with the time loop, I think would have made more sense. To a lesser degree, the same goes for the character of Catherine Brewster. Her character seems very much the same at the end of the movie as she did at the beginning. She doesn't ever seem to have an aha moment where the weight of the timeline hits her and she realizes she has to step up. She sort of does. She flies the airplane at the end and she picks up a gun and shoots one of the prototype Terminators, but it never feels like a big turn for her character. That's the biggest problem with Terminator 3. The two ostensible protagonists are really boring and not fleshed out in a logical kind of way. And the other problem with the film has to do with the build-up to the ending. The film does not do a good job showing what's going on in the world around the characters. Even though there is this dangerous computer virus spreading throughout the net, the only evidence of the virus we ever see is that characters can't use the phone, or a cash register doesn't work. That was a big missed opportunity. What could have been shown there would have been crashes to the electrical grid, or medical information systems, like hospitals being paralyzed, or emergency calls being misrouted, or traffic lights going haywire, like the sequence in Die Hard 4. None of what Skynet is doing at that point feels threatening. Another problem is with the setting of the military base where Skynet is being worked on. in that it feels very much like a generic location and doesn't even necessarily look like a military facility. I think some more establishing shots of the location and showing how secure it was and how much personnel were there, an attempt to make the facility seem more imposing, as well as the fact that when the prototype Terminators start attacking people, we only really see it in terms of the main characters. Missed opportunity there to show firefights between soldiers and the machines and have a grander sense of scale. And some of that also could have been achieved by using, like in Dr. Strangelove, some lower camera angles when they were at the military facility. Kate Brewster's father's decision to use Skynet is a really bad choice. And that moment in the film could have been a lot more dramatic and a lot more tense. And lower angle shots of him would have made him seem to tower over the audience in those scenes as this more epic, flawed figure. So those are my main beefs with the film. What do I love about Terminator 3? Well, I'll just get this out of the way. The crane truck chase scene. Just one of the most insane property damage sequences in a Terminator movie. And beautiful miniature work, by the way, the models that they used for the trucks and the police cars. It's just beautiful sequence. Jonathan Mostow is one of the best directors out there for filming car chases, and that sequence shows it. I understand a lot of people find this scene annoying because it happens so early in the film, but I don't think there was any way to avoid that because I think the crane chase takes place about 20 minutes in. And being a sequel to a Terminator, you have to let the audience know that they're watching a Terminator movie. You have to pull out the stops there. You know, the only problem is there's no action scene later in the film that really tops it. And that's why I said earlier that I think it would have been important to make the facility where Skynet was being constructed a more big, epic, imposing place than they did. But the thing I love the most about Terminator 3 is Arnold Schwarzenegger's portrayal of the Terminator. It is my favorite iteration of the character, if the Terminator can really be thought of as a character. The fact that he has murdered John Connor in the future and been reprogrammed to come back to save him, I think is the most creative use of time travel paradox in the first three films. It's dark, it's ironic, and it allows for some edgier humor. And the moment where the Terminator has been reprogrammed by the TX and is trying to tell John Connor to get away from him, I thought was actually a surprisingly good emotional moment for those two characters. Maybe even the best emotional moment of the first three films, because we can actually feel some pity for the Terminator, which is not something you're expecting. Another thing I think the film really gets right is knowing that even though it's this beautiful summer day, the world is going to end in a few hours. I think the film does a good job of capturing that tone, which to me is essential to the Terminator movies. It's the whole mystique of them. And I don't think Kristanna Loken gets enough credit for her portrayal of the TX. I thought, for example, the gruesome touch of having her sample, a target's blood, and that moment when she realizes that John Connor, who she was not even expecting to find, was just at the veterinarian's office. Her robot character has this moment of mental shock, and she communicates it perfectly. I also like that Terminator 3 has a down ending. In a certain sense, because it has to. Judgment Day cannot be stopped. And I can also appreciate that it's a film that feels smaller than Terminator 2, because how in the world can you go bigger than Terminator 2 anyway? You can't. So Terminator 3 is a film that I think is, for the most part, a very well done sequel. It's just a sequel that by design had to go in a direction that was necessarily sadder and darker than the previous film.